Hello, my name is Cole Sutton, and I will be presenting to you the essay written by Judith Sargent Murray titled On the Equality of the Sexes. Okay, so background on Judith Sargent Murray. She was born on May 1st, 1751 in Gloucester, Massachusetts. She was the oldest of 8 children, and only 3 of her siblings actually made it into adulthood. So she was educated from home, and this is primarily her father was her teacher, and he allowed her to use the family library to gain access to more resources in order to advance her intellect, and she learned other subjects such as art and science that were typically not offered to women during this time period. In 1792, she was a writer for the Massachusetts Magazine, and she was one of the very first American feminists. So her writing career. Murray had to write under a pseudonym for most of her career. This was because women were not viewed as equal during this time, so she had to use a fake identity. That fake identity that she was most popular for was the Gleaner, and this was the name that she used in the Massachusetts Magazine to post many of her works and essays. She was advocate of equality for women in a marriage, the right to an education, as well as the acknowledgement of female intellect. Okay, so the era where all this was occurring was the post-American Revolution, right after the United States gained independence from the British. So Murray's advocacy for women came at a time of hardship for the nation as a whole. The government was very unstable. The country is being pulled in many different directions. There are many different ideas for how the country should be ran. But not only that, the nation was unstable and had varying social, political, and economic issues that it was facing at this time. Murray was inspired by the likes of other radical ideas coming to fruition and gaining attention in America at this time. She is considered one of the important Enlightenment figures. So this is toward the end of the Enlightenment, and raising that the issues to the public, so that the public was aware. She felt it was her patriotic duty to bring these issues regarding women's inequality to the public's attention. And I put this quote in here for you just because I thought it kind of tied perfectly into this slide about the American Revolution. So the American Revolution produced a new outlook among its people that would have ramifications long into the future. Groups excluded from immediate equality, such as slaves and women, would draw their later inspirations from revolutionary sentiments. So, while Judith Sargent Murray's fight for equality really did not have a great impact during this time, she laid the foundation for women to be able to fight for women's suffrage in the future and for equality as a whole later down the line. Okay, so the essay that we're going to be focusing on is her on the equality of the sexes. This essay was known to be one of the first essays of feminism in America, and kind of the three things that her three main arguments right here that she made throughout this essay were that the 4 common traits that men and women shared, and that women arguably do better than men, and that's having an imagination, the ability to reason, having better memory, and making better judgment. So this is just one of the many arguments that Murray advocated for in favor of women. And I put a quote in here for you guys that I thought was intriguing to me due to the power that can be felt within her speech. And so it's, yes, ye lordly, ye haughty sex, our souls are by nature equal to yours. The same breath of God animates, enlivens, and invigorates us, and that we are not fallen lower than yourselves. Let those witness who have greatly towered above the various discouragements by which they have been so heavily oppressed. So as you can see through that one, Murray challenged biblical verses and their meanings as well as the characters. She had a lot of Bible verses and many of the characters in the Bible are men that she uses an example of, and she argues that she uses these men, or that men are used metaphorically rather than literally with their gender in the Bible. And another interesting thing that Murray does is she uses Mother Nature as a juxtaposition of power to God, who is generally viewed as a man. When you think about the world, you kind of think about Mother Nature and God, and you can see that that's kind of a man versus woman aspect there. Okay. So this is the first video I have for you.
Today, it is recognized that the Declaration of Independence excluded many Americans. The document declared that all men are created equal, but it did not mention women. Although the document failed to address women's rights, many women were patriots. Who were some of these women? Abigail Adams did attempt to influence her husband when the Declaration of Independence was being written. In a letter to John Adams, she wrote, "Remember the ladies, and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. Do not put such unlimited power in the hands of the husbands. If particular attention is not paid to the ladies, we are determined to foment a rebellion, and will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we have no voice or representation." Judith Sargent Murray was another woman who, inspired by the Revolution, began to question women's historical place in society. In an essay on education, she argued that a woman's mind was as good as any man's, and that girls should receive the same education as boys. This was an extremely radical argument at the time, as most girls received little or no schooling at all. Women in the 18th century.
So that video basically just kind of summarizes what I've already told you guys, but I guess good to have another kind of source for that information. So the relevance to today, it's definitely relevant to today because of all of the different things that women are still fighting for their equality. So Murray was one of the first women to give women a voice. While her efforts may not have caused change immediately, she took a step toward a revolution in favor of women's equal rights. And you can see this today as women are still fighting for the right over their bodies, as well as issues in the workforce, such as equal pay. A more precise example of this is women fighting to be able to get an abortion or not. This is a very controversial issue that has sparked debate within the state and federal governments. Okay, so what others think about Judith Sargent Murray? So Lance Eaton, a professor at Brandeis University, provides online learning through YouTube to explain important parts of history. He explains important aspects of Murray's speech that makes her so effective, and as well as the audience that she directed her argument towards. And you can see that in the next video here.
One of the things she does within this essay, which is written in the 1790s, so it is a product of the Enlightenment, is that she uses the language of the Enlightenment to destroy or to disregard or to say why man's dominance in culture is unacceptable or should not work. That is, if we believe in the ideas of the Enlightenment, then we have to recognize that men should not be dominant, that there should be equality among the sexes. And at large, within this piece, I think, what she does really well and has been done or continues to be done up through today is she isn't just talking about individuals. She isn't just talking about this person is sexist and that person is sexist. She's talking about the ways in which the institutions, in which the culture promotes these inequalities, in which the culture shows or creates realities for the different sexes in which equality isn't possible.
Okay, so just to wrap things up, just as I said earlier, the use of Murray's language that is derived from the Enlightenment era demands men to have to address these issues that women face, and that it would be wrong to have many of the Enlightenment ideas and then just to disregard the women's inequality in particular. Eaton also makes a good point about how Murray targets society as a whole that has contributed to neglecting the issue of women's inequality, and it was not one individual that was responsible for the lack of improvement for them. So I'm just going to leave you with these two questions here, and that's number one is, if Murray did not write under a pseudonym, how many people have viewed her writing at the time? And number two is, why do you think that it took so long for women to finally be able to earn the basic right to vote, to have the same jobs, to be financially independent? And what do you think the next step for equality for women is today? Thank you for listening to my presentation.